All right. I think we can get started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. For the next 25 to 30 minutes, we'll be discussing the emerging human risk trends of 2023. Before we get started, let's go through some housekeeping items. Joining me today is Jon Gelin, who is in charge of monitoring threats here at Hoxhunt. Jon, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for joining today, everyone. Really looking forward to the session. I'm Jon Jelin, working in threat operations here at Hoxhunt. So really like hands-on with the hundreds of thousands of monthly reports we receive.
Yeah, thank you, Jon. And really, it can't be overstated just how much work that Jon and his team does looking at tens of thousands of threats every month and marking them and analyzing them. Also joining us is Elliot Tolkvist, a product marketer here at Hoxhunt. Elliot, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Elliot Tallqvist. I'm working with marketing campaigns and marketing intelligence. So happy to be here today. Exciting to hear what we have in store.
Thank you, Elliot. And I'm Elliot Baker, Director of Content Marketing, working closely with the Hoxhunt product teams here at Hoxhunt. And I'm here to share cybersecurity education with the world. So today we'll be covering the following. First, we are going to review the biggest threats in 2023 so far. Then we'll discuss the anatomy of a threat. And finally, we'll look at how to adapt your training to a changing threat landscape. Before Jon takes us through some of the biggest threats he and his team have seen during 2023, I wanted to provide some context of why we're here and explain why it's important for enterprise cybersecurity teams to stay up to date of threats in the real world. Real world threats, whether successful or not, help paint a mosaic of the evolving threat landscape as a whole, which can be used to shape cybersecurity agendas across the business world. Each individual threat may have broader implications than it seems. Stitching these together shows trends of what attackers are trying and what's working. Being able to adapt security measures and training according to these trends might just help prevent your next big breach. So, take the recent MGM hack. This attack has had various kinds of reporting as to what caused it, but all of it traces back to social engineering, whether it really was or was not a phishing attack, whether it had other kinds of components to it. So really, all it took was an attacker impersonating an MGM employee to request a password reset from the company's IT team. Unaware of the impersonation, the IT department complied, giving the attacker access to the employee's account, which ultimately led to the cybercriminal gaining control over MGM's entire system. Similarly, Clorox is still reeling from a cyber attack that happened in August of this year, when a cyber attack forced a system wide shutdown and disrupted business to the tune of $593 million. The operational disruption was so severe that Clorox products are in short supply across the world, contributing to an expected quarterly earnings loss for the major manufacturer. These kinds of human based breaches are exactly why Hoxhunt exists. Technical security leaders are not enough. It's imperative that companies find solutions to manage their human based risk and find ways to elevate their security culture. Hoxhunt is a human risk management platform that uses behavioral science and an AI engine to run frequent phishing simulations that measurably change user behaviors. So often, it's not actually measurable. It's often awareness will exist in kind of a vacuum or in a silo. With the right types of simulations sent to all users on a recurring basis, you increase their security competence and drive down your chances of being a victim of an attack like these. Because Hoxhunt assigns millions of simulations to thousands of end users every month and monitors all reported threats, we have a lot of data on both real and simulated phishing attacks. When users spot a cyber attack in real time, our platform flags it, and a team of analysts break down the attack type, users affected, and more. We learn from them, and we share our findings every week in the threat feed. Jon, can you explain more about how your team works?
Yeah, sure. So we have a multidisciplinary team analyzing the data in various ways. And then we're spinning it into, for example, intelligence that we then use to ensure that our training is actually tackling the real risks. So educating our users about the latest techniques and preparing them also for the future advancements. So the threat feed kind of recaps threats throughout the year, and that leads to my team really having a good understanding of the types of real threats out there in the wild at any one time. Right. So with that, let's take a look at the biggest threats of 2023 this far. I've broken down this section into three key components of a phishing attack. So we'll discuss some of the prominent social engineering lures used in phishing this year, then explain some of the techniques accompanying these, and in the end, we'll take a look at the payloads that are delivered with these fishes. So let's start with the lures. One thing common with most phishing attacks is that there's always some kind of call to action. So, some kind of story meant to lure the recipient into interacting with the email and to take the action. So, lures in phishing come in many shapes and sizes, as you can see here. Malicious actors are really great with coming up with these. Of course, you have your typical postal phishing attempts or prince needing your help to move gold out of the country. But there's also an endless stream of convincing variations. We're, for example, seeing impersonations of TikTok, usually informing the recipient of some kind of security concern. We've seen a Tinder fish notifying the recipient that they've got a match, and the IRS is also often impersonated in campaigns offering the recipient a hefty tax refund and so on. And all these attempts, they attempt to drive some kind of reaction from the recipient, really weaponizing different emotions in hopes that they don't think things through before interacting. When looking at this year alone, bank impersonation has really been among the top stories used. Banks in all shapes and sizes have been impersonated in the whole globe. So the story here usually is that there's some kind of security related issue, which might then lead to the recipient's account being frozen should they not take an action. So really jumping between someone and their money is great at weaponizing fear. These lures are really quite good at driving reactions from people. And since also banks are quite regional, these campaigns are typically really localized using the correct language and so on. Postal services also been another extremely popular, especially during the beginning of the year. Most likely also going to be quite relevant again towards the end of the year. As earlier said, this is a bit of an evergreen one, always present in the landscape, but comparing to previous years, these have really stood out. In these, curiosity and greed is often weaponized with stories such as a package seemingly containing something valuable to you and just pay a small postal fee and receive it. And similar also to the banking fishes, these often come really localized with the correct templates and languages. And these ones are a good example of fishes that are the most dangerous when you receive them at the right moment. So these are often sent in large quantities during holidays around Black Friday and similar events. Yeah, internal authority is also a super common one, increasing not only in popularity but also variety during the previous year. So while the typical CEO impersonation campaign is still a really popular one, human resources have also been trending. And obedience, fear, curiosity, and greed are common emotions used in these with a wide assortment of stories. So we've seen some really timely ones, such as a vacation schedule themed fish before the summer, and some quite brutal ones referencing to a company size reductions and so on. Some have also opted for the positive lure, and such as the one on the right about a well deserved raise, which might hurt quite a bit. So now that these lures have captivated your users, let's take a look at some of the more prominent techniques to trick them into falling for the trap in the end. Advanced contextual data is actually the first one that came into mind when doing this presentation. So they really stood out this year. Uh, as some background info, spear phishing is this really scary subcategory of phishing where malicious actors perform really targeted attacks against specific organizations, teams, or sometimes even individuals. And for these, the malicious actors perform quite a bit of reconnaissance to create some like really hard hitting phishing emails. And to succeed in this, they might use like strategic bits of contextual data also in the email about the victim. And in the case of this technique, then we're looking at enormous phishing campaigns as usual, hundreds or even thousands of recipients. But now these also contain contextual data similar to a super targeted spear phishing attack. So that's pretty scary, right? By scraping data from then various sources such as social media and leaks, malicious actors have sent some campaigns containing more information about the individual recipient than before. So it's quite common for us to see campaigns with details such as the recipient's name, the place they work at, and the logo, which are easily automatically derived from the email address. But now we're seeing campaigns including their titles, functions, and more like in-depth company details at large scales. So it's really going to be interesting to see how this one advances. Flash attacks are also one of those prominent techniques this year. So a flash attack is the technique of buying a domain really similar to a real one and using it for a quick impersonation campaign with increased legitimacy. A really common lure here has been impersonation of different smaller organizations, sometimes also really large ones, posing as their resourcing department and sending out malicious documents disguised as purchase orders. A really good one we saw this spring is the one in the picture here. It originated from the domain metaforsupport.com, informed the recipient of their Facebook business account being restricted due to a policy violation. And this really could be a pretty large blow, at least to some like smaller organizations. And then when you go and hover on the link, the recipient will see a domain which looks really similar to the real one, which might then be enough to win over their trust. And by the way, if you're part of a security team, mitigating these by blocking domains newer than like a couple of weeks, maybe 3 weeks, might be a good idea to look into. Yeah, link redirects are also another technique, not really unique to this year, but super prominent also. So, cybersecurity programs, they often repeat the same story. Hover on the link before you click. Everyone knows this. It's another question how many actually do this. You really should. But to counter this approach, actors are nowadays using quite often like URL shorteners that then mask the end goal of the link. And link redirects then take this a bit further. They redirect traffic through other domains. And a campaign using like a LinkedIn lure might, for example, use a LinkedIn is link to then redirect the user to the malicious domain. So when the user checks that the links match the story, they will be pleased to find LinkedIn.com. But what they might not then realize is that the link will actually redirect them elsewhere. So these are at times really hard to spot. They sometimes even fool the automatic filters, further really assisting these to get past the technical defense layer into the recipient's inbox. And to make matters even a bit more complicated, these are sometimes also used in the QR codes fishes as an extra layer of obfuscation, which we're getting to next. So QR codes. We are seeing QR codes being used in really familiar templates. And the boom really started off with mainly IT notifications and signature service impersonation with brands such as Microsoft and DocuSign impersonated. And there's now been progress into other common themes too, such as bank impersonation and HR impersonation that we mentioned previously. We're also beginning to see attacks originating from compromised business email addresses using QR codes instead of typical malicious files in those types of campaigns. During the previous weeks, however, there's been a decrease in the popularity of these as spam filters are luckily starting to catch them. And our threat analysis team has been closely following the QR code trend during the past year, and this year it really has blown up. It's not often we see such a large change in the threat landscape, and even less often we see this type of change persist for such a long time period. In fact, during the second week of October, almost 22% of all malicious threats analyzed by our threat analysis team utilized QR codes for payload delivery. So that's a huge number for a technique previously seen in just a few handful of campaigns on a yearly level. However, our data also shows that recipients are 3 times less likely to actually interact with the QR code compared to traditional malicious links they have to click on. So knowing that, you might be wondering, why is this technique so popular? And that's a really good question to ask, actually, and one I've been also wondering for a long time now. So when we initially saw QR codes used years ago in phishing campaigns, it's it was really common to see one-off campaigns using them, dying off quickly, and then returning with links instead of QR codes. And this really made us believe that they weren't too successful, and I can't really see why. QR codes are really out of place in an email where links can be used. Also, even though QR codes have become more popular lately, many still have not really embraced them, at least the older population. And when looking at phishing templates using QR codes, a funny minor trend has also been the increasing amount of guidance that the malicious actors actually include on how to interact with the code. So I mean, just look at the one in the picture here. It includes a 3-step guide on how to click on the link or scan the code in this case. So lots of negatives, but also on the positive side, these are really good at passing through spam filters, at least up to now. So many vendors haven't offered any way to automatically detect and scan QR codes, which has allowed the malicious actors to really reach their recipients' inboxes with super high success rates. So even though our benchmark data, which Elliot will actually tell you more about soon, showed that people are 3 times more likely to click on a link than scan a QR code in an email, when you're able to get way more emails through the filter straight to inboxes, the returns are going to be much greater. Yeah, so we have the lures and the techniques. Let's next take a peek into the payloads that they work so hard on delivering. So, on a high level, the most common payloads by far are email credential harvesters, and they come in many levels of quality. And the most usual method to deliver credential harvester is still a link in an email. QR codes, of course, now being also a popular option too. And when we look at the malicious attachments in emails, currently the HTML file type is also by far the most popular. That's a change that's been happening during the past few years. And these HTML files also typically contain credential harvesters. Some other really popular ones are phone numbers, often delivered with a story that someone's using your credit card, and all you have to do is calling a number to decline it. And then, of course, you need to give some personal and financial details, and everything should be good again. Sounds great, right? Not really. These personal and financial details are also being harvested on fake sites disguised as like banking sites and streaming services, postal services, and so on. And a bit more rare in numbers, but still really present, are then the various ones leading to malware, so potentially even ransomware cases. But with these, the actual payload is often not anymore found in the email. There's usually some kind of link leading maybe to a site where the loader is found, and then it goes from there. One really strong trend on the payload side we've seen this year is adversary in the middle, or AITM for short. It's really the next generation of credential harvesting with MFA and session token harvesting capabilities also. So incorporating this technique into credential harvesters has really allowed malicious actors to effectively scale their operations, really fighting back at the enormous setback they felt when MFA was widely used or utilized. Yeah, but briefly put, AITM means in credential harvesters that instead of a custom login page designed to look like the real deal, the end users in a way interact with the real site, but with the adversary then listening in on the conversation in between. So they're then kind of copying the tickets to the ride when the user is about to receive them in exchange for their credentials, snooping in between. So let's take a look at a typical credential harvesting site. Here I'm logging into a credential harvester, a common one, and notice how in the top bar, instead of microsoftonline.com, we're on some completely different domain. And when I attempt to log in with this random account, the harvester is happy to take my credentials, just leading me to a loop where I'm prompted to retry as many times as I'd like. Often, after a certain number of attempts, the harvester will just throw me to a real site in hopes that I'm already logged in and won't be alarmed completely. For comparison then, this is a AITM capable harvester. And when logging in with the same account, the page informs me that the account has been blocked. Let's see here. So this is the same notification you'd actually receive when logging in on the real page with this account. And then when logging in with the burner account for this demo, the harvester should be happy to again take my credentials, but notice how it knows more details about my account. So there we can see email code to gmail.com. So it found my recovery email from the real page and it's now displaying it to me. And as the credentials were correct, logging in is successful. And in the end, we end up on the real side, even though we're still on the wrong domain actually. So now let's take a look. We're still on the same site we previously were on, but I've now added MFA to this account. So this time around, the harvester prompts me to input my authentication code. Pretty scary, right? And as the credentials were fine, we are redirected to the real site again in hopes that we won't notice anything. Then if we look at the sign-in activity for this account, it reveals that while I logged in from Helsinki, there's actually a simultaneous login from an IP link to Lithuania. So there we go. Yeah, that's it for me. I'm now giving the turn to Elliot, who's going to be going a bit deeper into the experiment that Hoxhunt ran regarding those keyword phishing attacks.
Thanks, John. Exciting to see the annual trends of what's happening out in the threat landscape. And actually, we at Hoxhunt did our own experimentation with our network during September, where we tried one of these attack vectors in a simulated phishing attack. So, as John's team had seen a global surge in malicious actors' use of QR codes globally, we decided to do a simulation on that. And in the benchmark campaign, we simulated a phishing attack using QR codes, which you can see on the screen in front of you. And the simulation is of hard difficulty, so level 3 out of 4 in our training, and is designed to work worldwide in organizations. And the benchmark gives insights for the organizations that participate into their readiness levels and how they fare against currently trending novel campaigns. So the Hoxhunt Challenge benchmark simulations was sent to 125 countries in 9 industries into 38 organizations and 600,000 employees almost. And the simulation was delivered to all participants during the last 3 weeks in September this year, and was sent to mostly all employees in the participating organizations to give a truthful view of the human risk levels. And we chose to simulate the training campaign to help our network stay ahead of the curve while expanding their employees' knowledge. So this was sent to all employees in organizations, those who had been in the training and those who had not been in the training. And a key finding that we've found from the benchmark study was that you strengthen your organization's defense program by enrolling more employees into the training. So here you can see on the bar chart that employees that have been in the training are 12 times more likely to perform a positive action, for example, reporting a phishing attack when encountering it. So therefore, these employees can withstand a larger amount of phishing attacks. So just painting this as a picture, I'm the employee in the training. I can withstand 15 phishing attacks, but I fall on the 16s. My resilience ratio is 15. John, on the other hand, he can withstand 1.3 attacks and he fails on the second. So if the organization would consist of all Elliot, we would have a quite strong defense. But if it would be all John, it would have a quite weak defense. No harm here, John. And as we can see that we can draw the conclusion that employees that participate in training defend organizations more when they are facing QR code attacks. Also, my personal favorite finding we found from the data is that the longer you are in the training, the better you perform. So as we can see here on the x-axis, we have the amount of time in training, and y-axis, we have the amount of percentage of end users that reacted in a certain way. And we can see from users that were new to the training with 0 months of training and compared to users with 18 months of training, that they reported 3 times more than the new users. If we look at the users who missed the simulation, so didn't click on or scan the QR code or failed to report it, so they missed it, this number decreased by 1/3 if we compare to new and experienced users. And last but not least, we see that the employees that scan the QR code or happen to click the link decreased by 3/4 compared to for a whole long time you have been in a training. So I just want to highlight and stop here. All the employees that were in this benchmark were all in an organization where they had a Hoxhunt training program. They're sitting together, drinking coffee, chatting about their everyday stuff. But we can see the massive difference between somebody who is participating in a training and somebody who is in a long training compared to those who either drop out or never participate in it. So those who have engaged and motivated employees to take the training also defend your organizations from malicious attacks such as those that John presented here today.
John and Elliot, thank you so much for the research that you presented here. Elliot Tallqvist, I just want to say that this is a remarkable benchmark study. I think it's possible there has never actually been this large and this comprehensive of a benchmark study in our industry. Typically, I've seen some very large ones done out of Switzerland. There's another one done out of, might have been Michigan, but they typically number in the tens of thousands at the most of users, and usually with one company or a couple. To have this many companies, this many geographies represented, to basically be looking at also just one key variable switched between how people behave in the case of a phishing simulation, it's really powerful. And it goes beyond, of course, just how people behave with a QR code. It really does show what kind of an effect that a good behavior change and awareness training can actually have on people's resilience and readiness when they receive these types of attacks that we see in the real world. And that also can't be overlooked as the fact that this is an attack that was directly ripped out of something that was reported by users of Hoxhunt and then transformed into a learning experience. So this is also a really important thing to show, is that what Jon and his team are seeing in the wild is then sometimes immediately turned into a training experience and put into our training so that the training remains dynamic with the constantly evolving threatscape, as opposed to having some kind of a training that's always training you on yesterday's threats. It can't be overstated how important that is, especially in today's era of these emerging threats with the use of AI, with QR codes, with adversary in the middle, which also, that's my personal biggest fear for the future of threats as well. Is the more I hear about adversary in the middle attacks, I think we have a lot to be concerned there. But great work, Elliot, on this. I appreciate it. We
Thanks,
all
Ian.
appreciate it. Yeah, absolutely. And great work, Jon. So now we've talked a lot about the problems and examples of 2023 threats. What do we do next? What do we want to take away from these trends and learnings? These are the questions security leaders should be asking themselves as they monitor real-world threats. Are my simulations effective at training good behaviors that might identify and report these kinds of attacks? Jon and team do a great job of analyzing these threats that get automatically flagged by Hoxhunt. We learn from them, and then we take these learnings directly to our simulation library and build new simulations to be distributed to thousands of users. Well, actually, it's millions of users across our customer base. This helps make sure our customer security training evolves with the modern threat landscape and doesn't fall behind. If you want to make sure you don't fall behind, make sure to sign up for our threat feed to get weekly updates about the biggest real-world threats. And if you want to learn more about Hoxhunt's growing library of nearly 1,000 phishing simulations inspired by real-world attacks, I encourage you to visit hoxhunt.com to learn more. We'd be happy to chat with you about how our platform uses behavioral science and an AI engine to run simulations that measurably change user behaviors. Just message us there. Thank you so much for your time today.